Hey everybody, welcome back to another class. We are coming close to finishing book number 1. We have some very good chapters coming up. I am Rabbi Morty and I approve this message. We'll start with L'chaim. Messages of the Tanya shall infiltrate our nefesh Bahamas. L'chaim. Okay. Chapter 30. In chapter 29, the Alter Rebbe is dealing with Timtum Alev. Timtum Alev is what happens if you aren't getting it. You're insensitive. The material is good, but you can't appreciate it. So we went. You have to break your nefesh Bahamas. You have to think about, you have to think about where you stand. And you have to, try to break through the grossness of yourself. You heard about the story of the kid in a museum, like he ruined. He damaged a 50 million euro painting in a Dutch museum. I don't know, he scratched it or something. Yeah, this kid. Anyway, so the kid didn't appreciate. The kid didn't appreciate what it is. Sometimes we don't appreciate it. So we did all that. Chapter 30 is we are going to continue with this conversation of how to put yourself in place. Because why aren't you appreciating the good stuff? Right? It's because of you. If I bring you a bottle of wine, 200 years old, right? Some French Bordeaux, whatever it is, right? You ever see the way they open the glass? You ever see that? You ever see them do that? In the French things, you got to. They cut the glass. They don't even take out the cork. It's the way they cut the glass. Yeah, it's a whole thing, and the very hula, whatever it is, right? And then I bring you some $10, and I give you the 200-year-old wine. I don't know. It tastes the same.
Wine in a box.
You're right, right? So then I tell you, listen, Mister, if you can't appreciate the wine, you're the problem. Not the. Didn't they find a ship or something with the wine that was still in there?
Yeah, like 2,000 bottles.
Yeah. It wasn't the Titanic. It was something else. No, it was
Spanish ship.
Right, but they found the wine still in there.
It's not kosher, though, right?
Probably. I don't know if it's good. If it's old enough and good, then we can make an exception. I'm kidding. Right. It all depends. God forbid. So the problem over here is if you are not appreciating godliness, if you're not a person reads and learns about how God is this and it creates and God sustains and God has all these celestial beings that still He wants to hear from you, and it's not impacting you, then the problem is you. So how do we deal with the you? So the answer is you got to lessen the you, and we're going through different methods. Okay. So, Oid Zois, here we go. Chapter 30, page 393 in the new print, in the old print, sorry. Oid Zois says, another thing a person can take to heart, can think about, is the Kai Maimed Azal, to fulfill what the rabbi said. This is in chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Father. It says you should be exceedingly humble before every single person. Now, the problem with this thing is, what do you mean before every person? You're telling me I should consider myself lower than every person? What if I'm not lower than every person? What if a guy says, listen, yeah, I learn Torah, I do mitzvahs, right? I have this fancy velvet yarmulke, right? I have very long woolen tzitzis, right? I quote this many times because it's such a great. This guy was giving a talk to Orthodox Jews. Because, like in every community, people in the Orthodox community also have this feeling that we love everybody, but we're just a little better, right? Mm. So the guy was saying, you see the way my hat goes up, because I'm going up to heaven. Those guys with the hat turned down, they're going down to hell. You see the way my yarmulke has a rim around it, that's to guard me from falling to hell. The guys with the yarmulke with no rim, they're going to hell. You see the way. I have tzitzit, I wear it out. I mean, people were laughing, but he wasn't joking. He's saying we make all these minor things that I'm just a little bit better than everyone else. So here the Alter Rebbe is saying is, let's say you have a guy who keeps Torah, keeps mitzvahs, And the Torah is saying over here, it doesn't say be exceedingly humble before other Jews like you. It says before every single person. But what if I'm better than the other guy? Right? What if a guy who's Torah observant meets a guy who doesn't keep Shabbos, doesn't keep kosher, doesn't keep anything? He should be exceedingly humble before he consider himself lower than the other guy. And we're talking about the guy who's a nice guy, right? Doesn't speak Lashon Hara, previous class, right? He's a nice guy, all around. Not those guys who keep Shabbos, but cheat on their taxes. We're talking about a well-rounded guy, right? And he meets this guy, right, with tattoos, curses, speaks Lashon Hara, is not a nice guy. Just his name happens to be short. And the Pirkei Avot is saying he should be exceedingly humble even before that guy. How? Why? How does that make sense? Right? It says, and the language in the Mishnah is very, very precise. It doesn't say, you should be exceedingly humble before everyone in your community, everyone who's like you, or before all Ashkenazim, not Sephardim. It doesn't say that.
Before everybody.
It says before everyone. Before every man. So the question is, how can, and again, this book is called the Sefer Shel Beinin. This book is called the Book of the Intermediate Man. That means the Torah, the Alta is talking about over here to the Beinoni, who's obviously better than the Rasha, right? The Rasha sins, the Beinoni doesn't sin. So how's the Beinoni supposed to feel he's lower than the Rasha? No? What's the answer?
But is it lower or humble? When you say by lower, what do you mean by lower?
You should consider yourself lower. Shafal means low.
Right. Low in what way?
Low of spirit.
Lower class, lower spirit?
Lower spirit, that I'm a nobody. I'm a nobody.
Or you're at par with that person?
No, lower.
Even lower?
Lower.
Even lower?
Yeah. So now. So now, because of this difficulty, some people say it doesn't mean consider yourself lower. It means conduct yourself. Don't get excited over yourself. Conduct yourself with a very self-effacing attitude, right? Yeah, you do the mitzvahs, but obviously you're not lower than that guy. You're not. But conduct yourself in that way. The Alter Rebbe doesn't take that. Alter Rebbe says, no. If that's what Rabbi Yehuda Anasi wanted to tell us, he would say, conduct yourself in that way. He says, "Ve'hev a shuffle, be this way." Alter Rebbe doesn't. He says the words. What I'm saying, that's what you should do. Now, let's answer how. The wording be thus. That's what it means in all sincerity. B'fnei kol adam mamish, before every single person. Afilu b'fnei kal shebekalim, even before the most worthless, the greatest sinner. So now the question is, how? How can we make consider ourselves lower? So, I'll introduce the answer, and then we'll learn it inside. The answer is because not everybody is equal. Meaning, your Avera and that guy's Avera is not the same. Your mitzvah, not the same. Let's say you take a guy who grew up in Borough Park. Right? He went to yeshiva his whole life. His parents are religious. His grandparents are religious. The only people he knows are religious. The bus driver, the plumber, the electrician, everybody's religious. Everybody keeps Shabbos. Everyone keeps kosher. It's the only reality he knows. Right?
This guy lives in West Pines?
No, this guy lives in Borough Park. Let's say, right?
Oh, okay.
Borough Park.
Right?
Borough Park. Grew up in Borough Park, you said.
Yeah, right? How much credit do you think he gets for keeping kosher? For making the conscious, and he shops at Goldstein's and Rifki's, right? The baker's Jewish, everyone's Jewish. How much credit do you think he gets for keeping kosher?
Same as
What do you mean
everybody
by
else.
credit?
No, of course not. What do you mean?
Credit. What
Nobody
kind of
cares.
credit?
What kind of credit?
Yeah.
Godly
Godly
credit.
credit?
Nobody
Godly
else
credit.
cares.
Godly credit.
How much credit does he get?
Yeah.
Compared to the Jew that
Compared to the guy who didn't grow up religious,
Right.
who lives in West Pines and goes to Publix and sees chicken is $1.99 a pound,
Right.
then goes to Rome and says it's $3.99 a pound, right? Or you can go to Walmart, how much a steak is, let's say a steak is $8, or Publix, whatever it is, right? Or whatever it is, and you can get a rib steak for $10 a pound. You know what a rib steak is in the kosher store? $23 a pound,
Yeah.
right? And he says, no, I am not going to. I'm going to buy. Do you think that the observance of kosher is the same?
No, obviously, but godly credit.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, godly
Yeah.
credit. When I say that it's the same, godly credit. The Rambam talks about this. Not every mitzvah, although the action is the same, is judged the same. It depends on the person, his circumstances, his everything. Everything. It's a whole formula. That's why chapter 2 we're going to read in Pirkei Avot. We're going to read the Shabbos. Rabbi Eimer, the first Mishnah, says, be careful with the small mitzvahs and the big mitzvahs, because you don't know the reward for the small mitzvahs. You know, we're very busy making accounts. We say, well, you know, if I keep kosher for 6 days, then in 1 day a week I can have, you know, a hamburger.
Burger King.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, or you know, people do that. I don't that the example, but we kind of legitimize it. Or it's okay to do this because I'm very good at doing that. You know, whatever this and that, fill in the blank. And Rabbi Huda Nasi says, no, don't do that, because you don't know, because it could be a small mitzvah for me, but it's really not a small mitzvah. It be a big mitzvah. Every person is judged based on their circumstance. Right?
So if that guy who grew up in Pembroke Pines all of a sudden keeps kosher, his mitzvah is bigger than the guy in Crown Heights because it's harder for him?
100%.
It is.
Of course.
But all right, so let me ask you this, right? In some of your Shabbat speeches, you say that every Jew is a Jew is a Jew.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then how do you get more credit? How does that Jew in Crown Heights get any more credit than the Jew in Pembroke Pines?
You're mixing up two things.
What?
A Jew is a Jew, meaning that no matter what you do,
Yeah.
or regardless of what you don't do,
Right.
you're still the same Jewish.
Right.
At your core, you're Jewish, and you can't change that.
Right.
Now, the question is, how do you reveal that Judaism? That's what the mitzvahs are about. Mitzvahs is about bringing your core subconscious identity out. Now, that's part. As an aside, there's something called schar neinish, reward and punishment, that God put us here to produce. Now we have to produce regardless, whether the reward and punishment is there. That's not. We don't focus on that. We are here to produce. We're here to work. Now God said, now obviously we're not going to work for free. That wouldn't be fair. So God says, if we do A, B, and C, it's not reward and punishment. It's a contract. The Torah is a contract. Life is a contract. You are here, like in the words of Pirkei Avot we're going to learn, we are day workers. We are not indentured servants. We are day workers. Just like a worker is hired and then he's fired when he's not needed anymore. That's what a human being is. You're hired. God puts you into this world to produce. And when God no longer needs a person, he's dead.
So it's conditional. If you obey my commandments.
No, but if you obey the commandment, you get A, B, and C.
Right.
If you don't, God says, then A, B, and C is going to happen.
There's mitzvahs
Yeah.
that have nothing, that's not necessarily, you know, you help an old lady, you help someone get up that can't get up or whatever.
Yeah, but that,
That's not a
yes it is, because,
necessarily a religious.
but no, you're going from all the way around. The Jewish people, our religion taught the world about global kindness.
Okay.
And now the world is saying, oh, we don't need Judaism anymore because we figured it out on their own. No, they didn't. 1,000 years ago, no one cared about the old lady. They were stealing from the old lady. No. We're the ones that taught the world. The Torah is the one that taught the world about humanity. And by the way, when you do something positive, it creates a positive domino effect. So that's why it's a mitzvah, because you're bringing goodness and kindness into the world. That's what that is. So the fact that society has come to the realization, has learned the positive societal effects of acting that way, that's a result of the Torah. They didn't figure that out themselves. We taught them that.
Yeah.
That's the effect of the Jewish people living all over the world for the past 2,500 years. Huh?
We would have killed each other.
That's the line straight out in this week's Pirkei Avot also. Pray for the government, because if not, human beings would consume each other. That's the way human beings are. You think naturally we care about each other? No. The answer is no. We don't care about each
It's
other.
your animal instinct.
Yeah, we don't care about each other. The only reason why I don't speed is because of the cops. The only reason why I don't steal is because of Walmart.
Is that why you don't speed?
That's why you don't speed. I've driven with this guy.
Cut the tape.
I don't know. Come on. You better make a retraction on this.
Different example.
I don't speed because I'm not inclined to speed.
It should be Tanya and laps, not Tanya and Ohio.
All right, everybody. The reason why I don't steal is because there are cameras in Walmart, right? That's what human beings are. Now, there is an element that society has grown to an understanding that if the only reason why people don't steal is because of cameras in Walmart, then it's not a healthy society. So there's a societal general understanding, sort of like with nuclear, what's it called, mutual destruction kind of thing. Societal understanding that for the betterment of society, it's not good to steal. And it's good to help your neighbors. Why? Because I help you, you help me. It's a healthy societal understanding. But human beings didn't learn this behavior on their own. Think of society as a child. Children have to be taught to see outside themselves. Imagine a child is never taught to share, to be considerate, please and thank you. You think the child will one day figure it out on their own?
No.
No. Until, look what's happening now with children. Don't ever hear no. Don't ever feel disappointment. This is a problem in the modern day workplace. These kids don't know how to function in the real world. They don't know how to function. This is not me talking. This is a real problem where kids get rewards for, even though they a participation trophy. You know, they don't know what rejection feels like. And in the real world, you're rejected. You fail a lot. That's what life is. And they don't know how to deal with it. So you think humanity would just learn to be nice to each other on its own? Of course not. How do I know this? What do you mean, how do I know this? Look at the thousands of years of human existence. Look what the Europeans were doing to each other before the Jewish people came. You think it's a coincidence? That the Europeans just decided to, heck, there's 600 years of the Dark Ages. What do you think they were doing? They think they went into a cave to learn Torah? They were killing each other. I'm saying this is straight out the effect of the Torah. This is not, and there are many, by the way, this is not me there are many people that say it. There's a famous book by Thomas, over here somewhere. Thomas Cahill, I think it is. It's called The Gift of the Jews. It's on I think it's on, just the scientists, the historians, they say it straight out. Anyway, we got off track. Just a little bit.
When you told us about your speeding.
Listen here. Driving is like mopping the floor. You want to get it done as fast as possible. Right or wrong?
All right, pitch 404.
Yeah,
Right.
but if you drive fast or slow, you're gonna be at your destination 2 minutes faster. So-
All right,
so
2
be
minutes, I'm not
careful.
driving. Anyway,
You're not.
so the
There's been studies about that also.
Well,
So the answer is,
You don't even get there fast.
so the answer is like this. The truth of the matter is, we're talking about before. The Beinoni is saying, how can I consider myself lower than this guy who doesn't observe Torah? I'm obviously better. Are you better? Why? Because you were raised in Borough Park and you went to a yeshiva and your parents bought you black pants and white shirts and a tefillin for your bar mitzvah and you went to shul every Shabbos and every day. Why? Because that's what everyone did. Are you sure you're better? That makes you better. Because you were raised in a religious family, that makes you better. Who's it? Because you've done more mitzvahs, because you were educated that way, that makes you better. Really? Who's it? Baby, that guy's better than you. You just didn't have any opportunity. Let me ask you a question. Most of the scientists and geniuses have come from, let's call it, the Northern Hemisphere, right? Right? Let's call it from Europe, Russia.
There's a theory about that too.
I know. Let me ask you a question. Do you think...
Cold weather countries.
Yeah.
Cold
Do you,
weather,
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, it's called a Sunbelt theory. Sunbelt theory, yeah. But do you think there are no geniuses in Africa? Really? India? No geniuses? You know, Europeans, Western society, we tend to look down other people in Africa, they're stupid. Really? You think there are millions of people living, a billion people living in India and in Africa? Maybe it's just lack of opportunity.
Colonization.
Whatever, lack of opportunity to education, lack of opportunity, forget about why, lack of opportunity. So does your availability of opportunity make you better? Makes you lucky. Doesn't make you better. And this, by the way, just to go off on the sidetrack, because this is what we do here. Now you can understand why the religious community went nuts when the Baal Shem Tov came out. Baal Shem Tov came out and told the scholars, who were really the people who had opportunity, either because of money or because of brains. They were born, with a great head, so they were sent to yeshiva. You guys aren't better. You guys are lucky. The simple Jew who either never had opportunity because he's poor, or God didn't give him the brain. But he's serving God with more sincerity, and he's actually serving God, meaning he's pushing himself. He's not just doing it because, I don't know, that's what my father goes to shul, so I go to shul. He's actually serving God. You're just, I don't know, playing follow the leader. Now, for the simple Jew, hey, we're not losers. We're actually worth something. We actually have a part to contribute here. And for the people in the ultra-Orthodox, religious community, could you imagine what the message is? They're saying that you're telling me I'm a bigger loser than this guy who can hardly read, who I say the whole siddur, and in that time the guy says 2 lines into Tehillim, and I'm a loser, and this guy is better than me. You can understand why that message didn't go down well. Now you understand why there was such unbelievable opposition against Hasidism in the beginning. But the people that took the message to heart in saying, is God asking me to serve him, which means serve means to schwitz, serve means you push yourself, or is God asking me just to go through the motions? No. So the people that were honest with themselves, they came to the Baal Shem Tov. And the people that felt very indignant and offended, they fought tooth and nail against Chassidus, because they felt that, what do you mean? You're changing the whole status quo. You're threatening the existence of Judaism. You're saying that learning Torah doesn't mean anything? Well, learning Torah means a lot. The question is, are you serving yourself for learning Torah? Are you learning Torah so you can get a nice shidduch? So you can get a place at the Eastern Wall? I remember, I'll tell you a story. Maybe the story shouldn't be recorded.
Yeah.
Maybe the story shouldn't be recorded, but I was speaking to a guy, and he's telling me his brother, not Chabad guy, he's telling me his brother is a big scholar. Says he's going to get an apartment. And I'm like, huh? What does that mean? I said, what do you mean you don't know what it means? I said, no, I don't know what it means. He says, let me explain to you. Again, in the Chabad world, it doesn't work this way. He said, the way it works is, he tells me, is that in some religious communities in Israel, actually I think in New York or Lakewood as well, it says that if a guy is a great scholar and he's like a real prodigy, and all the guys want their daughters to marry a scholar, so they offer up, like, we'll buy you
Dowry.
a dowry, an apartment, and depending on how great of a scholar you are, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom apartment. I think it was in Israel. I'm thinking, like, in the Chabad world, this doesn't exist. Not only that, I never even heard of such a thing before he told me. Right? Because Chassidus says, you serve the Eibishter not for an apartment. You serve the Eibishter because that's what you gotta do. And you're supposed to schwitz, and you gotta push yourself. And God willing, whatever happens. I'm not saying these guys don't serve God for the right reasons. But the point is, we get so caught up sometimes in thinking, oh, I'm a better Jew because look at my talis. Your talis goes over here. Look at my tzitzis, you know what I'm saying, over here. My hat's up here, you know what I'm saying? And we think, obviously, I'm better than that guy. Look at that guy. Look what he has on his tattooed on his hand. He doesn't wear a yarmulke, or he comes to shul in shorts, or he doesn't keep kosher and everything else. That's not how it works. You don't know. Number one, his level of opportunity. Opportunity means a lot. Number two, you don't know. The Alter Rebbe is going to say here, you don't know his yitzhar. That means you and I can see the exact same thing and have different reactions to it. Let's take a vulgar, crass example, okay? A guy's learning. 2 guys are learning. An image, a car, a pretty woman walks by with something really that's not nice, unholy, right? Subject A can just go back to learning, tune it out of his mind. Subject B, he's distracted. That's it. He saw it, now his mind is... So now, they don't have the same yitzhar. You can't judge because you react. Let's take food, for example. I remember once talking to a guy, actually one of my brothers. I'm one of the smaller guys in my family, by the way. And I'm not that skinny, but, in my family, I'm one of the smaller guys. Just tell you that in my mother's family, my father's family struggle with weight. I remember speaking to to one of my brothers. I said, and I didn't mean it in a bad way. I was asking him because I really don't understand. Because me, when I'm full, I stop eating. That's it. Sometimes I eat a little bit too much, but I asked him, I said, I don't understand. Just stop. Just stop eating. He said, Mordechai, let me explain to you something. My family members call me Mordechai. And Giddy. Those are the only people. Everyone else calls me Morty or Rabbi. She says, I'm having a bowl of cereal. This is the example he gave me, right? You have a bowl of cereal. You eat the cereal, what happens? You have milk. So I put in cereal. Then you run out of milk. I put in milk. I said, but it's a vicious cycle. I said, but in the end, you run out of milk. You go to the garage, you get another bottle. Then I realized there's nothing in his brain telling him stop. And to me, it's very easy to judge him and say, why can't you just stop eating? But in his brain, something telling him to stop. So it's very easy for me to sit on my high horse and say, you fat slob, and you piece of garbage, and you control yourself and everything else. You're a disgrace. But I don't suffer from that challenge. So Alter Rebbe says, you want to know how it's possible to consider yourself lower than everyone else? Maybe, if you would have the same Yitzhahara, you'd be worse than him. I'll tell you a story. Am I not recording? Yeah, it's recording. Yeah, it's recording. There was a Tana. Sorry, not Tana. I think it was a Tana or an Amira. I think it was a Tana. And one time in the Beis Medrash, if it's not recording, they missed a good class. One time in the study hall, they were talking about the previous generations. And there was a king of the tribe of Yehuda. His name was Menashe. He was the king of the tribe of not only the tribe of Yehuda, the southern kingdom, for 55 years. The longest tenure of any Jewish king. And of those 55 years, 50 of them were terrible. He was sinning. Not only he was sinning, he was leading other people to sin. The last 5 years, he decided to repent. Okay. But anyway, so this is hundreds of years later, 1,000 years later. They were talking smack about him, that he was such a bad person, such a terrible sinner, a real terrible, wicked, evil person. So the Gemara tells a story that Menashe comes to the rabbi who was leading the charge, speaking bad about this guy, in a dream. He says, I understand you're talking dirt about me. So it says, you consider yourself a big rabbi. So big rabbi, let me ask you a question, because you're a big rabbi. You're talking down about me. He asked him a question about purity and impurity, which I said in the previous class. The laws are very complex. How to do with bread. The rabbi said, I don't know the answer. He says, you don't know the answer to this simple question? And you're sitting there talking dirt about me? So he said, what's the answer? He gives him the answer, a very complex answer. So the rabbi turned, it's all in a dream. The rabbi asked the king, said, I don't understand. Here we thought you were sinned because, you were, ignoramus, turns out you were a big scholar. So how come you're such a big sinner, especially with idolatry? So the king said, let me explain to you something. You live now in a time where it's a post-idolatry period, where Jews weren't, drawn in by the lure. Thank you, that's what I was looking for. The lure of idolatry. But there was a long time, there was a big problem. It says, if you existed in my time, the king Menashe tells him, you would be at the front of the line. In fact, you wouldn't be able to pick up your robe. They wore robes back then. You wouldn't be able to pick your robe high enough to run fast enough to serve idolatry. You're talking big, but you don't have the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination to serve idolatry. So do me a favor, shut it. All right? Many times we judge people, but we don't know what's going on inside them. What Yetzer Hara, what's drawing them to act this way. So Alter Rebbe says, you want to know, Jerry Seinfeld has the joke, sometimes he's sitting in the back of the cab in New York and the guy's driving, just want to put your hand on the guy's shoulder and say, what is going on in your life that's causing you to drive this way? Calm down! Right? So Alter Rebbe says, you want to know how to feel lower than every person? Says, maybe if you were in that situation, you'd be even worse. You don't know. Stop being so judgmental.
Put yourself in their shoes.
Right?
Don't put yourself up on a pedestal.
When a person, by the way, when a person passes away, an interesting custom, that you can give away everything of the person, clothing and everything else. There's one thing we don't give away. We throw out. The shoes. You familiar with that custom? The shoes. Why? Because no one can walk in this person's shoes. This person lived a unique life. And you don't know what it means to walk in that person's shoes. The good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is. Right? Yeah.
It has nothing to do with shoes. It has to do with your phone.
What's that?
It looks, the image on the screen
It's cloudy.
cloudy.
Maybe it wasn't been, I don't know. I don't know. Low battery. Oh, it has been recording.
You, even though you're doing that, you should still consider yourself lower than the other Jew who's not, because that's how you serve Hashem.
Because, again, let's put it in context. The problem we had started because a person is not appreciating, is trying to contemplate the greatness of God. He's not feeling inspired.
Right.
What's the problem? Because we know the information is good. We know the medicine is good.
The
problem is the recipient.
Right.
So usually, or maybe always, the problem is the person, his grossness, his physicality is too much to appreciate godliness. He's too caught up in himself. Now, sometimes we think that too caught up in himself means he's too busy eating cheese danishes. But sometimes the ego can come from spirituality also. He feels very full of himself because he's very good at doing mitzvahs. Right? Thinks it's better, and that's also bad.
Yeah.
That's a spiritual arrogance.
Like
That's
Jackie Mason used to say, "You are such a big shot."
Right. Right. The Jew walks into a restaurant. I want to sit over here. Right.
You're such a big shot.
Exactly. I know it's late, but let's at least do a little bit. V'hainu, back at the bottom of 394 in the old print.
404.
V'hainu al pi ma'amad hazal. This can be accomplished. What the rabbi said. It says, "Ain't al tadin es chavercha." Do not judge your friend ad she'tegiya lamekemeh, until you reach his place. Why? Alter Rebbe says something very powerful here. Because it's his place that's causing him to sin. His job, let's say, it makes him go. He's exposed in the marketplace. You're a scholar. You're sitting there learning. You only see you're in Bar Park. This guy, he has to go, to the where is it? Sunrise.
Flea market.
So the flea market. He has to be lois mishiv karanis. He has to deal with these. You have to deal with these guys. And his eyes see all these things. And the eye sees, and the heart desires, like we say in Shema. Don't pursue your heart and after your eyes, because what the eye sees, the heart wants. And it could be not only two things. First of all, there's exposure. Second of all, he has a very hot yitzhar. He's a very passionate person. He's burning like a flaming fire. However, but on the other hand, someone who goes into the market a little bit, he has very little exposure. Most of the time he's sitting in his house. Right, he works by a computer. And even if he has a lot of exposure, it could be he's not very hot-blooded by nature. Things don't excite him. Because the Yitzhar is not equal to every person. So you have two different. We'll stop over here. We have two different issues over here. Number one is exposure. Number two is your natural tendency. It could be your natural tendency is you're cool by nature. So you see something, and it doesn't drive you to want it right away. And can you imagine if a person has a cool Yitzhara, and he's less exposure, then why is he going to sin? As opposed to a guy who's exposed to all these things. I'll end with one story. Actually, two stories, but it's getting late. One time, the son, the oldest son of the Alter Rebbe, who later became Rebbe, his name is David. His name is the middle Rebbe. When he was a young kid, he was walking around. He learned something. He felt very good about himself. So one of his chassidim, the Alter Rebbe's chassidim, saw him. He said, "Beryl, you think you're a hot shot, huh? You think you're so special? Why? Because you learned something. You feel good about yourself, huh? Let me tell you something." So he says, you know who your father is? Your father and mother did a Rebbe. He says, and we learned back in chapter 2 that when based on how the parents conduct themselves during intimacy, that impacts the soul. Your parents, when they brought down your neshama, obviously they brought it down in the holiest way possible. And your father is the leader of the generation. So what neshama did he choose for you? The best of the best. So you're the best of the best. Your conduit and the way your neshama is clothed and expressed is the best of the best. So what do you expect? The best of the best. You know what my parents were? My parents were farmers, simple farmers. I don't even know what they were thinking. And you know what? By the time they came to choose my neshama, I'm the sludge at the bottom of the barrel. All right. So do me a favor. Get over yourself. The kid was broken. Torn, because he realized every accomplishment wasn't his accomplishment, it was his father's accomplishment. And he was crying, he was distraught. The Alter Rebbe called this chassid in, and the chassid thought, oh boy, the Rebbe is going to destroy me, because what I told the son. He told the chassid, I want to thank you because you made my Beryl into a chassid. Now he's going to push himself, because before all the accomplishments were not his. But now he realized that all the accomplishments weren't because he's better, because he was gifted. So our job is to use our raw talents for good, and never ever look down at another person thinking, "Oh, I'm so much better," because you have no idea what's going on in that person's life. Have a good week.